reconvene officially, and motions arising from closed session. I believe, Madam Deputy Clerk, we have one motion with one separated item, and if that could appear magically upon, look at that, and if it can appear magically upon my screen before I even say that, that would be better. But this committee recommends the council that is recommended in the confidential report CSLD 2101, dated January 7th, 2021, from the Corporate Services Legal Department, the sale of lots 5, 6, 7, and 17 located on the Horn Business Park lands be approved. And the staff be authorized to finalize an agreement of purchase and sale for lots 5, 6, 7, and 17 located on Horn Business Park lands in accordance with the terms and conditions outlined in the letters of intent known as LOI, LOI as set out in the report, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute all documentation necessary to effect the sales of lots 5, 6, 7, and 17 located on the Horn Business Park lands, and that the offers presented for lots 2 and 4 be received as information, and that the net proceeds from the sale be transferred from the land acquisition to the land acquisition reserve. Is there a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor? Thank you, Mason. Thank you, Ted. Discussion. If I may, thank you. And I know a couple of others echoed similar concerns. I think that if 4 is being received as information for the purposes the staff spoke to earlier, then I believe the number 4 should be included with the other lots that are for sale. And if there's an amendment to that, then a second or two to put that amendment on the floor, I will move that forward, and if not, then I'll let it go. Thank you, Pat. Oh, and Ted, you wish to speak on that? Go right ahead, or on that item.
I do, Mayor Clark. If I recall our discussion from a few minutes ago, that by receiving it as information, we are in effect providing staff with the opportunity to do what we said we would like staff to do, and that they would then return to this table at a point in time if there were to be a change in the offer. This way, we are authorizing you to sign the offer as is. And I do believe that giving the staff the flexibility to continue negotiations does not preclude us from doing what you are suggesting, but doesn't commit us to doing something that we may, in fact, later regret.
I appreciate that, Ted. I will say I still have a philosophical issue with that direction. If that is the will of council, then I will abide by it and allow for the direction that you're alluding to. Amanpreet, did I see a hand halfway in the air there?
Thank you, sir. The point that I wish to present before council has already been made by Councillor Eamon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ted, a follow-up?
I do, Mayor Clark, and I just think in the current real estate environment, as we're seeing in the residential environment in Orillia, that we're getting competing offers, or these realtors are getting competing offers on homes that are in fact resulting in prices beyond listing prices. So my sense is that we, as the representative of the taxpayers, are obliged to not only optimize the use of the land for the best purposes possible, I think we have an obligation to optimize the return to the city, as well as acknowledging that our local enterprises that are wishing to expand and grow have an opportunity to do so. But all three of those are important, and I don't want to eliminate any of them through an inadvertent action.
No, I understand that. I certainly understand a couple of points you made in terms of maximizing the ROI. But I do believe that negotiations that happen with given criteria at a given time, done in good faith, are done just in that light. Having said that, I was to say I will acquiesce to the will of council, and if there's a desire to move that amendment forward, then we'll do so, and if not, we'll treat the motion as it is. Any further discussion on the main motion? Now, so there is now an amendment. I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, sorry, I did. Ralph, you wanted to speak as well, so go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Ted on it, because that gives staff the opportunity to renegotiate, and that's not stopping them from coming back to this table saying, okay, we're going to go with the original offer after it's done. Am I correct in assuming that, Amanpreet?
From the chair's perspective, I believe you are, but I'll let Amanpreet weigh in.
For you, Mayor Clark, I think I missed the gist of the question.
There's still the opportunity for this to come back to council one way or another, correct? At one price point or another, correct?
For you, Mayor Clark, yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Okay. If staff would be so kind as to put the amendment on the floor. Sorry, the amendment, I believe, was to not receive number 4 as information, but to put it up with the other, and I was moving it, and Councillor Hume was seconding it. Yeah, sorry, I'm just reminded by our very diligent staff that there was one more offer made under the same conditions. Is that correct, Amanpreet? So this would, it's the, I won't speak about the use, but there were two potential purchasers in the same situation, correct, Amanpreet?
That is correct, sir.
So, Megan, if you would reflect both of those, I would like to put both of those back on the table with the other items, the other lots. Yeah, the two items. Oh, go ahead, Amanpreet. Go ahead.
For you, Mayor Clark, we have already received what we had requested from the other parties.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the amendment that I'm talking about really should just capture the one. Is that what you're saying? Number 4. Okay. I believe that's he said the one sounds like the one lot that the one lot that was being referenced to as the second one was they'd already received the information back from the potential purchaser. Amanpreet, did you want to expand on that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark. So there were 3 parties, A, B, and C. Parties A and B had provided information at a previous date, so we had enough time to go back to them and asked them for some changes. Those changes have already been provided. The party that you're referring to through the amendment, it was prior to the triggering date, but not in time to be presented, to be asked for what we are requesting. So through the report, we had requested council to afford us that opportunity to ask what we require. The motion that is on table would take away that opportunity from staff. So my apologies, the amended motion would take away that
Amendment to the motion on the table would take that opportunity away.
That is correct.
Correct. Okay, we do have a direction. Amanpreet, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Through you to council. The amended motion would, in fact, the impact would be that we would be treating parties A and B differently from party C if the amended motion passes. That just as a point of clarification.
Yeah, that is helpful information. And having that information is potentially a game changer. I still have a philosophical issue with the process, but anyway. Anyway, I thank you for that piece of information. I do have the amendment to go on the floor. Mason, is it okay if I put the amendment on the floor and then go right to you? Is that all right? Great, thank you. Just printing that off. Okay, great.
Introduce it as a standalone motion.
Sure. So, Christine, if you put that on the screen, that'd be great. So, this is the amendment to the proposed amendment to the main motion. That the motion now before council be amended by deleting the following from the fourth paragraph to be introduced separately. And 4. I am the mover and Pat is the seconder. And now I will open the floor for discussion. I'll start with Mason.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I just wanted to note that I will not be supporting this amendment moving forward. And I'd just like to thank Amanpreet for his comments. They were pretty logical and along the same lines that I was thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments? Jay?
Thanks. It's just a question about process. I want to make sure I'm understanding it. So let's say this were to pass, there would be another motion afterward making further changes to number 4 then. Lot 4? Sorry, I can't hear you, Steve.
Sorry, if the amendment was successful, number 4 would be brought back to today to council separately.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other, Pat, right ahead?
I'm just trying to get this clear in my head. I think what Mr. Sidhu is saying is that other lots had already been given the opportunity to come forward to increase the value of their property, but lot 4 hadn't. And if that's the case, then I wouldn't support treating lot 4 differently. Is that
Yeah, that was additional helpful information. I will say that, but this process had already started. Anyway, any further discussion on the proposed amendment to the main motion? Okay, I will have it put back on the screen. And that is it there. I'm sure everybody understands that. And so I can see everybody right now. I will now call the question on the proposed amendment to main motion. All in favor? That is defeated. Thank you. We'll go back to the main motion. And I'll entertain further questions, comments, discussion. I've got everybody in little pictures. So if you've got your yellow cards, this would be the perfect time to use that. Tim, I think I saw your, go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, no, just to say that when we come to these amendments, and I may be bringing one forward at the ratifying meeting next Monday. I think it's sometimes maybe simpler if we're not sure where we're going, is to put the amendment on hold and talk to staff during the week and maybe come up with something for the council meeting itself. And to that end, we had a discussion about site condition, and I will be talking to staff this week and may bring an amendment forward next week.
Oh, no, that you're quite right, Tim. The preferred vehicle always, the process is to always have those discussions with staff at the earliest possible time. It had not occurred to me to bring this amendment forward until actually I heard a couple of members of council that illuminated the issue for me. And I'm glad they would have done that. But anyway, glad to see what your amendments may or may not be next week. Any further discussion on the motion before you? And we have a mover and a seconder, correct? Thank you. I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do this for council. Before we go to a call for a vote, we'll have to remove the thing and go to the big screen because those little things are a little pain in the butt unless people are using their yellow card, and not everybody is. I'll just ask you again, if you've got your yellow card, it certainly makes it easier. All right, moving on. Consent agenda. Sorry. Oh, sorry. We have to finish off the motions rising from closed session. So this committee recommends the council that has recommended the confidential report CSLD 2101 dated January 7th, 2021 from the Corporate Services / Legal Department. The sale of Lot 1 located on the Horn Business Park lands be approved, and that staff be authorized to finalize an agreement of purchase and sale for Lot 1 located on the Horn Business Park in accordance with terms and conditions outlined in the letters of intent set out in the report. And the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute all documentation necessary to effect the sale of Lot 1 located on Horn Business Park lands. And then the net proceeds from the sale be transferred to the land acquisition reserve. Is there a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor? Thank you, Ralph. And thank you, Pat. I'll now entertain the discussion. Seeing none, I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Nothing on consent agenda, nothing on the board reports, council referrals. We've got with respect to the report from last year that came to us in December around tree preservation bylaw. We have introducing this particular report or reintroduction of it. I believe that would be Mr. Crawford. And, oh, Mr. Williams. Just one moment, please. Mr. Sugden, I think I understand the process. This was postponed, so I'm not sure if there's a formal introduction or not, but if you would just set the stage for the process, and then I'll go to Mr. Williams.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Clark, be happy to do so. Both Mr. Crawford and I are standing back in the wings, but the purpose of today's meeting was to allow the members of the Environmental Advisory Committee to speak or address to the staff report to council. So staff have presented the report in December, and it was the council's desire to have EAC members present at today's meeting so that they could speak to council on the staff report.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sugden, and no stranger to this chamber, Mr. Williams. Happy New Year, Michael, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the same to you and members of council. I have joining me here today a couple of members, Jane Bonsteele and Javier Capella, and they'll probably click on their camera so you can see them in a moment. I would like to take just a moment, sir, to give a brief introduction to this from our perspective. This is not something that we took lightly. We have spent years working on this proposal, and I want to thank Jane in particular for the myriad amounts of time she spent doing research. Council members may recall that Jane has a very strong environmental background and certainly was a key player in researching this. Also, we're pleased to have the benefit of having Javier on our committee. Javier is a registered professional forester and an arborist by training. And Javier's background, he was an area forester for York Region in charge of urban forestry and street trees proposal for 3 municipalities there. So he has a fair understanding, I'd like to suggest to council to bring to this matter. Of course, all of you know our award-winning naturalist who sits on our committee too, Bob Bowles, and he was instrumental in helping us with comments as well. We had Lee Hansen from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, who for many years has had tree planting and forestry experience with that organization. We have a member of, former member of the Environmental Commissioner's Office, and we also have a person who is now with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities who has water and natural resource management experience. So I just wanted to outline that going in here because I wanted council to understand from our perspective that the years of work that we put in on a proposal, and I would stress, this is a proposal for your consideration, is not something that we've taken lightly or that we've just thought, oh, this might be a good idea. We've done a fair amount of research and based some science behind this. We started a while ago, some of you may recall, with a evaluation of the tree canopy in the city, and we came and presented that to council. Two of our former members worked extraordinarily hard on that to crunch the numbers and get it through. I suspect, as do other members of EAC, that with the emerald ash borer marching through the city now and other issues that perhaps that canopy cover number has gone down, but we have not revisited that of late to check that out. And the other thing that was important to take note of back at that time is that we included Scout Valley, which, as all of you know, is a very large forested tract of land. I simply raise that because we would point out that in that study, the benefits of a good tree canopy are not shared equally across all wards of the city. And in 2018, the province brought in Bill 68, which was a requirement for municipalities to update tree canopy and natural vegetation conservation and enhancement policies, and council did that, and the staff did that with our input. So we're no stranger to tree initiatives, and we've also undertaken a number of events in the city to try and encourage people to embrace tree planting. We did a tree bait program, and we did a maples giveaway, in which over 100 families participated in that. That one was highly successful, and that was flowing out of the sesquicentennial of the city. So that brings us today to the proposed ideas that you have in front of you. In order to assist council, if there are questions, I'm going to try and make it a little more efficient with our virtual meeting to direct them to either Javier or Jane as appropriate. And I just want to stress to council that this is a proposal. With the benefit of staff's input, we had a very good meeting with Mr. Sugden and Mr. Crawford back late last year, and we made a number of amendments. Key among them is to have this apply to trees of a diameter of 25 centimeters or larger, which in imperial measurement is 10 inches. So our proposals would apply to a very substantive mature tree. I want to make sure that council understands that. And so we made that change. The other change, which is not made its way through to some of the notes, is that we suggested that the track certification be dropped. It was a proposal, it was an idea. And we would suggest that a risk assessment by a trained arborist would be satisfactory for the purposes of the proposed bylaw. So again, it's a proposal. We would recommend that along with the staff, there be consultation with the stakeholders on this. It's important to talk to the commercial enterprises who operate in the city and listen to them. It's important to hear input from property owners who have trees on their property. And EAC members would be pleased to undertake such a consultation in close cooperation with city staff, should council decide that would be an appropriate step to go forward with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure if Jane or Javier have anything to add. Javier, glad to see I'm not the only one with my Christmas tree still up. It's more of a winter tree now, it's a Christmas tree, and there you are living up to your desire to keep trees pointing skyward. Okay, so I just want to make sure that I understand the direction here. I mean, we have the recommended motion from the November 30th report, and then you've got and then there's some proposed recommendations from EAC that have evolved, it appears, over the last number of weeks. And then there's also a desire as part of this to have some consultation with some stakeholders in the community, including the members of the public. So I'm just curious what the actual direction is that we will be discussing around the table. Sorry? Yeah, option two was postponed, so we will I'll ask staff to put that on the screen, and then entertain have a discussion around the direction for this. And I will reread it because it was quite a while ago, and we still have a mover and a seconder for that. Tim and Jay, thank you. Councillor Lauer and Councillor Follis. This committee recommends the council that further to the report DSC 2034 dated November 30th, 2020 from the Development Services and Engineering Department, affectionately known as DSC, and the Environmental Advisory Committee, known as EAC, conduct a live virtual public consultation in winter of 2020-2021 in coordination with city staff to explain the purpose and intent of the proposed Chapter 370 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, tree preservation, and solicit input regarding the chapter as set out in Schedule B, with the exception that the chapter include the following provisions. Prohibit a person injuring or destroying a tree with a diameter at breast height equal to or greater than 25 centimeters, as Michael indicated, without a permit on any parcel of land in the city, regardless of the size of that parcel. Requires that each tree to be destroyed or injured is replaced with one or more replacement trees on the property of the applicant, or alternatively, where there is no reasonable alternative for the required tree planting on the subject property, a fee shall be required to be paid in lieu of the required tree planting that will be used by the city to achieve tree planting within the city. And number three, in order to obtain a permit to injure or destroy a tree, an arborist report must be prepared or certified by an artist that has successfully completed the International Society of Arboriculture Tree Risk Assessment Qualification Credential, and that the Environmental Advisory Committee prepare a survey in consultation with city staff, and then conduct an online survey in the winter of 2020-21 to solicit input regarding the proposed Chapter 370 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, tree preservation. And that as part of the public consultation process, the Environmental Advisory Committee obtain input on the following proposed amendments. Number one, amend Chapter 450 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, user fees, development services, and engineering to implement a permit fee of $250 to destroy or injure a tree, and amend Chapter 450 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, user fees, development services, and engineering to include the following. Where a condition of a permit requires that a replacement tree is required, but there is insufficient space, as mentioned earlier, or opportunity on a property to provide for a replacement tree over the long term, the general manager of development services and engineering or designate may require a cash contribution in lieu of such planting to be paid by the applicant to the city to support tree planting elsewhere in the city. The amount of the cash contribution shall be $350 per replacement tree, subject to a maximum of $35,000. And that the city city staff in consultation with the Environmental Advisory Committee or EAC report back to Council Committee in the spring of 2021 with a summary of the feedback received respecting the proposed chapter, along with a proposed new Chapter 370 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, tree preservation, for Council's consideration. And as mentioned, Councillor Lauer was the mover, and Councillor Follis was the shaker, the seconder. And I will now open the floor for discussion, starting with Councillor Lauer and then Councillor Ainsworth.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I just wanted to just go back to a comment Michael had made on the track designation, and we will be bringing forward an amendment to remove that from Clause 3, so that Clause 3 will only require that reports come from someone who is an arborist as opposed to track qualified. If I can get a seconder for that.
If you don't see one on the floor, I will second it, but I see Councillor Campbell there. Any other questions, comments? We got Mason and then Jay and then Ralph.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Clark. More of a comment than a question, but feel free, folks from EAC or staff, to correct me if I'm wrong on this. This essentially, if this does pass, will not be changing anything at this point in time, but it is essentially setting out the process for folks with EAC as well as staff to go out there to relay this information to folks, to seek that public input, to potentially change a few things as Councillor Lauer has mentioned, and to bring that back to the council committee table in the future when the time comes, so that we can have a discussion with that information from the public and having that data, and then make a decision on these proposed changes. Is that correct?
Mr. Sugden, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Councillor Ainsworth's understanding is correct. So at this point, it's a draft bylaw that has been put forward, and if this motion passes, there'd be a public consultation process that would be undertaken over the winter with members of EAC and members of city staff participating and evaluating the responses to report back to council.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Clark and Mr. Sugden. And with that, I will be happy to support this moving forward.
Great, thank you. I've got Jay, Ralph, and then Rob and Pat.
Sorry, guys, couldn't find the mic there. Just a couple of questions on this. I did want to express that I am supportive of this. I think it's a good way to ensure that this asset within our city is protected. I was curious about, there was reference there to removing this qualification for an arborist, and I wondered if we could just have a sense for kind of, I guess, the reasoning for why we'd be removing it, or like, is it something that is, in the grand scheme of things, not that significant? What were the benefits, drawbacks there? The other thing I was curious about too, and I could be wrong, but the way I'm remembering it was staff had an issue with using trees to replace the cost. It's not necessarily something I would agree with them on, but I was curious, are there, might there be ways of looking at that offset as a valuable offset in the sense that, you know, if someone's taking down a tree in exchange for planting trees, could we see that as a way of, you know, basically providing space where we can expand our tree canopy, but also providing more trees within Orillia's tree canopy? Like, is, although it's not a, you know, the financial benefit isn't directly applicable to staff time, can we look at that in the grander scheme as, you know, we're gaining an asset in some ways? I don't know if Ian's able to speak to that particular question, but just if I could, my primary question though being around the arborist qualifications and why we'd be removing it and what we kind of are losing in that.
I'll get somebody to address number one, then I'm going to need clarification on your second question, Jay, because you stumped the chair. Aside from the 21 benchmarked communities not requiring the track certification for the arborist, that's all I can add. But I will see Michael's microphone on. Mr. Williams, all yours.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Javier. I'd like to ask you to explain a little bit more about the difference between track and arborist certification, because we did relax this requirement, and it certainly was, if I could use the word, an aspirational requirement, because we had suggested that there be a set of qualifications for someone who could do the risk assessment on trees. But I'm going to turn it over to Javier, and he'll explain that for Councillor Fallis.
Great, Javier, all yours.
Thank you. So the initial recommendation we had was to use the track system. Track stands for Tree Risk Assessment Qualification. It's a fairly new qualification. It's only been around for about 5 years. And that is essentially, you could say, the gold standard for assessing risk. And the purpose of what we're suggesting is that a healthy tree ought to stay in the ground, and we should do what we can with trees to prune them or to mitigate risk. And that's one excellent way to mitigate risk and keep the trees there rather than reverting to cutting them down. But that's not necessary, the track system. What an ISA certified arborist, which is a requirement to then take the track program in order to fill out those forms. But an ISA arborist has the ability to make that assessment. An ISA arborist can fill out what's known as the tree hazard evaluation form, which is essentially what the tree risk assessment qualification form is, just at a, not as the most modern version of it. But an ISA certified arborist is more than capable to make the assessment of the hazards associated with the tree. And if those hazards can be mitigated by pruning the tree, if those hazards can be mitigated by changing how you move around or store things around the tree, or the hazards can't be, and so tree removal is actually required. So an arborist that is ISA certified is more than capable of making that determination.
Thank you for that explanation, the context, and the succinctness. Appreciate that. And now, Jay, with respect to your second question around the dollars and offset, if you could, in a very succinct sentence or two, restate your question, because I didn't quite understand it.
Yeah, I'll do my best, and apologies if it was kind of muddy there. So my understanding, kind of reading previous reports, was that this might be more of a question to Ian or Sean, was that staff had an issue because with the idea of offsetting the $350 by just simply planting a tree, because that would not basically cover the costs of staff time. First of all, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I thought that was kind of what the report had outlined. And I was curious, if we're going off that premise, would it not be worth looking at, you know, the value of planting a tree as a replacement? So in the sense that, you know, first of all, from my understanding, we've had a lot of issues finding available land where the city can plant trees to expand its canopy. But second of all, can we not look at the tree itself as, you know, an asset? So let's say someone cuts down a tree and plants two. Can we look at, you know, our current tree planting budget and say, well, that kind of offsets the cost of that particular budget? I don't know if that's clear enough, but I hope that's that kind of provides some light into my question.
Okay. I will look for Mr. Sugden or Mr. Crawford's light to come on. Mr. Sugden, go right ahead.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Clark, I'll take a stab at it and start. And if Mr. Crawford wishes to fill something else in, I'd be happy to allow that as well. So, what the intent of the draft bylaw is that if you need to cut down a tree, you've got to go through a permitting approval process to justify why you need to cut the tree down. And that goes back to needing the arborist report and other things as part of that justification. The intent is to preserve or protect the tree canopy. So we want people not just to take them down, but to also replace them. But in some lots, as this is going to apply to every lot in the city, there's some lots that are too small, or the development is already occupying so much of the land that there isn't a suitable place to replant the tree. So in that case, we want to be able to have the person who needs to take the tree down then pay a cost to replace the tree and into a reserve that would then be utilized by the city to plant trees to enhance the tree canopy in a reciprocal arrangement. So that explains what the $350 is per tree, and that's a sort of a baseline price for a tree of a certain size to be planted, supplied by a landscaping company and planted with its normal guarantees for the year that you get. So I hope that answers the question and the purpose. The other comment is that at $350, it becomes a bit of a disincentive for people to just cut down trees. If they have to pay a fee and they can't replace it elsewhere on their lot, they may give more serious consideration before they take a tree down.
Thank you, Mr. Sugden. Councillor Follis, are you good you're good?
Just a last follow-up. Apologies, I've taken up some time here. Just wanting to clarify, so as the bylaw is currently written, would a resident, let's say a resident wanted to take down a tree that kind of fit all these specs, they took it down, are they able to, as opposed to paying the $350 fee that's associated with the process, can they plant a tree to replace it as opposed to paying for that cost? And if so, are there certain specifications with the size of the tree?
I believe, and Mr. Sugden, go ahead.
Again, I'll begin, and either Sean or any member of VIAC may wish to fill this in even further. So the first fallback position is if you need to take down a tree, you need to replace that tree on the same property from which it came. But if that can't be done, that's where this $350 tree replacement cost comes in, so that it can fund the city's ability to plant trees somewhere else within the city.
Thank you. I think it's good clarity, unless Mr. Crawford has anything to add. Thank you both for that. Ralph, Councillor Swoll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have about 2.5, 3 questions here. The first one is, I have a little bit of problem with the motion, the way it's worded, because there's a couple of things. And this is for Mr. Sugden. Building lots are getting smaller and smaller in communities in order to accommodate development of housing and not building. So how's that affect our official plan that says, okay, on a 20-foot lot or on a 30-foot lot, you have to have so many trees or whatever? I strongly believe in the tree canopy. As a matter of fact, Orillia has one of the best that I've looked at, 32%. The only one that beats us is Halifax at 43%. And thanks to Pat's mom back in the 70s, we believed in the tree canopy with the city of Orillia because we had a little bit of a hard time getting trees on the main street, but we were successful in doing that. And if you look at the results today, but I'm just concerned about the private sector, not developers, private sector wanting to build a house or tear down a house and build a new one where the lots are getting smaller and smaller. And I just wonder how we deal with that.
So how do we deal with tree replacements or on smaller lots, as this applies to all lots? Mr. Sugden, I guess.
Through Mayor Clark, certainly as lots get smaller, it gets more difficult to find locations on a property to plant trees. When we do new plans of subdivision, for instance, or plans of condominium, we do require that the developers plant at least a tree in front of each lot, generally along the boulevard. But just to find a place on your own private property to plant a tree, as homes get larger and lots get smaller, it seems, it becomes more difficult. The intent, if you take a few steps back and look at things from a higher elevation, the province has been promoting intensification and infill development so that we can curb urban sprawl. The more you curb urban sprawl, the more land you leave in an undeveloped or natural state overall. That's the goal of that infill and intensification. So it may not be necessarily directly within an urban environment. You're going to have the tree canopy, but it may be surrounding the urban environment because you've successfully curbed urban sprawl. So we try through our site plan approval process, subdivision approval process, and condo approval process to encourage tree planting as part of all of those. And sometimes we end up with a net increase in trees. If you take a look at West Orillia, where it was all farmland before, the woodlots that are there today were woodlots that the farmer left behind, and they're protected or preserved through the subdivision approval process. And then where it was previously just farmland, we have been having the developers build or plant trees in those areas on each lot. So there's almost a net gain, and not of the size that we're talking about today of the 25 centimeter size, but eventually those trees will get to that size as well. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sugden. Go right ahead, Councilor Spola.
Thank you. And because we're talking about private property here, have we looked at the effects on the Charter of Rights? As an owner of a property, enjoy my property, and if I don't want a tree on my property for some reason, do I have that right? Have we looked at it from a Charter of Rights perspective, that the effects of it? Maybe Mr. Crawford can explain that to me.
It looks like his light's on, so I will go to Mr. Crawford.
All right. No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we haven't obtained a legal opinion specifically on that point, but what I will say is that the Municipal Act gives clear authority for municipalities to regulate trees. And there certainly have been some municipalities that have gone so far as to regulate trees on rural properties, regardless of their size. And I'm not aware of any of those municipalities being challenged on the basis of a charter breach. So all I can say at this time is that I don't believe it would be a charter breach to regulate on all properties, regardless of size rather. But again, we haven't had a legal opinion specifically on that point.
I have another question, if I may.
One question left.
There's a word in there that the height of the tree before the assessment, breast height. So the mayor is 6'3" or 4", and I'm 5'5". Where's that level. So I think that wording in there should change to a specific height. So if it's 5 feet from ground, 3 feet from ground, or whatever it is, but the different heights apply. So that's, and I would like Mr. Crawford to enlighten me a little bit on the existing complaints or fines that we've had to do over the last years or so.
I believe there were 5 complaints over the last few years. I'll let Mr. Crawford jump in and answer that. And I believe, answer your first question, the breast height depends on the mayor of the day.
Through Mr. Mayor, with respect to the diameter at breast height, so we do have that actually defined in the draft bylaw. And so diameter of breast height is measured at a point 1.37 meters or 4.5 feet above the ground at the base of a tree. So that would be the diameter at breast height that would be applied if this bylaw goes forward and is passed. And that's common. I mean, all the municipal bylaws that we looked at, we looked at several, all specify a diameter at breast height. And generally it was at that particular height. There was slight variance from municipality to municipality, but that was the general rule of thumb. We've seen that the 1.37 meters. Sorry, there was one other question. I apologize.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the complaints or charges that we've had over the years and the effects of this bylaw compared to the other one, to the one that we already have.
The different complaints over the last few years, Sean.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, we've only laid a couple of charges over the last several years. And we only get maybe 1-2 complaints a year at most. So right now, because the bylaw only applies to properties that are over a ½ hectare in size, I mean, it has essentially nominal impact from a staff resource perspective. Because again, it only applies to those, larger parcels of land. Whereas this bylaw that's proposed under option 2, as indicated previously, I mean, it would apply to every property regardless of size. So it will have a significant impact on staff resources. At this time, we anticipate a minimum of 60 to 100 hours of staff time annually that would need to be devoted to a bylaw that applies to all properties.
Thank you. Thank you both. I believe I have Rob and then Pat. Go ahead, Rob. Councillor Klooster.
Thank you, through Mayor Clark. I just want to say thank you to staff and to members of the EAC for the report. Previously, I was a little confused on some of the wording in this report, but now I have a better understanding of it. And I'm happy to see that the ISA certification is certainly a good conduit moving forward, as it has using the track certification. Because when you bring an arborist to your property, they're going to certainly work with you to the best of their knowledge to get the tree pruned and keep it in the best healthy condition as possible. I'd really like to see when this does, if it does become a proper bylaw moving forward, that we do really enforce and enhance the tree bait program for more maple trees in the city of Orillia. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Klooster. Councillor Heen.
Thank you. My question's partially been answered, and mine was about the certification of the arborist. I've seen some pretty botched trees being cut down in the past, and so I really would like to see some certification for the tree companies doing the tree cutting, and perhaps Michael, you could speak to that.
So your question is, do
the qualifications for the people that would be actually doing the cutting down of the trees, because I would really like to see that they do have some qualifications. And however, I think Harvey, I think you spoke to the qualification of the arborists, and the whether it was the track or the IAC, was that the proper?
Sorry, Pat, is your question, you're looking for the qualifications that the people who are taking the trees might have? I saw Sean's light on, and I see Michael's on, so I'll go Sean, then Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the way the bylaw is worded right now, is that an arborist means a person who has graduated from an accredited college or university with a diploma or degree in forestry, urban forestry, arboriculture, or equivalent course of study, and who holds at least one of the following professional qualifications: certified either by the Ontario Training and Adjustment Board or the International Society of Arboriculture, or member of the Ontario Professional Foresters Association, entitled to use the designation registered professional forester under the Professional Foresters Act. So my point there is that, you know, even with the elimination of the track credential, this person, based on the definition, still has to hold those particular qualifications. So this isn't the case of someone that has a chainsaw and calls himself an arborist. They have to have some qualifications to be able to, you know, have that expertise to provide those assessments.
Great, thank you. Michael, did you have anything to add? Okay, great, thank you. I believe, I don't have anybody else in queue. So with that, I will ask staff to put the proposed resolution back on the screen to make sure that members of council are familiar with it. Great, thank you. Okay, yeah, so if there's no, yeah, the main motion, just for a minute, or for a few seconds. So that's the main motion that has been read, and we have a mover and a seconder from the previous meeting. Now, would you be so kind as to put the, because I don't see another discussion on the main motion, put the proposed amendment on the table? And this is moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Campbell. The motion now before committee be amended by deleting the following in the fourth paragraph: that has successfully completed the International Society of Arboriculture Tree Risk Assessment Qualification Credential. So I have a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the proposed amendment to the main resolution? Councillor Ainsworth.
No, I had no comments, Mayor Clark. I was just moving my hand. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You're lucky this isn't an auction sale, Councillor. Okay, so I don't see any discussion coming forward on the proposed amendment. Whoop. I should know better. Councillor Falls.
Give it a second or two, and then my hand will pop up. Just kind of going back to this again. So my understanding is that EAC is comfortable removing this qualification because they see it as kind of an additional feature that isn't necessary, but it would be a bonus to have kind of thing. Am I understanding that correctly? Just want to confirm.
From the chair's perspective, you've summed it up well, but I would ask Mr. Williams to corroborate that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly correct. We are quite satisfied, as Javier has said, that this bylaw can, if it goes forward and we enact an arborist qualifications to look at dead, diseased trees requiring pruning, that those professional qualifications are absolutely sufficient for the bylaw. Okay. The track certification would be, the gold standard, as Javier has said, and a nice to have qualification. But we feel on further research and looking at this that trees can be protected quite adequately using an arborist.
Great, thank you, Councillor Paulson. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any further discussion on the amendment to the main motion? I will now call the amendment. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Back to the main motion. I don't believe it needs to be reread unless somebody insists. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Okay, I will now call the question on the main motion. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And to Jane and Michael and Javier, yes, thank you for the work that has gone into this report and for everything else that you're doing on EAC. I know that it's done with not just great passion, which is very important, but some wonderful ability as well. So thank you for that. And I would also thank the staff that have done a great work with that, including working with EAC. So thank you. And all the best in 2021. We're on to our second referral, council referral with respect to terryfox circle design. And who is introducing this? Mr. McMullen, I believe, as I recall correctly. Mr. McMullen, the floor, welcome, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to respond to a referral from Council on December 7, 2020 regarding the redesign of the terryfox circle. The terryfox circle requires redesign and reconstruction due to the deterioration of the roadway surface and in order to address safety issues related to noted conflicts between vehicular movement and pedestrian movements within this portion of the park. In November of 2020, Council approved a capital project to complete the necessary design work and construction documentation for the terryfox circle. The recently completed waterfront parkland design study identified safety issues due to circulation conflicts between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Further, it identified that the parking along the circle exacerbates this issue. The proximity of the playground and the movement of children also attributes to the safety concerns for this area. The study recommended removing vehicular traffic and that the existing parking be moved from the terryfox circle to a suitable location closer to the playground. The study acknowledged the historic value and importance of the terryfox circle as a local feature, but noted that continuing to permit vehicles along it contributes to unsafe interactions between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. This observation is consistent with park staff observations. The public input received through community consultation indicated that 70% of respondents supported removing vehicles from the terryfox circle, and that 67% of respondents supported moving the existing parking to a more suitable location closer to the playground. The design study to be completed will look at 3 options for the future of the terryfox circle. Due to sentiments brought forward by Council related to the approval of this capital project, the consulting team will be directed to include an option that would allow the circle to continue to be used by vehicles in a limited capacity. This option will allow for the circle to be opened up to cars for special and scheduled park events. The first steps in the work plan for the approved capital project include the development of 3 design options for the terryfox circle. These options will then be evaluated prior to the selection of a preferred option. Following the completion of this work and due to the interest in this project, staff will return to Council to present the preferred design option prior to preparing the final contract documentation and cost estimate for construction. Staff recommend that further to the approved 2021 terryfox circle detailed design capital project, staff be directed to report back to Council with an evaluation of 3 design options and an identified preferred alternative for the future of the terryfox circle. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. There is a recommended motion in the report. I'll entertain discussion first, unless there's somebody willing to put that motion on the floor. Is there thank you, Councillor Freeman. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Mason. And now I will read the motion, if staff would be so kind. Thank you. The Disc Committee recommends to Council that is recommended in the report DSC 2104 dated January 4th, 2021 from the Development Services and Engineering Department further to the approval further to the approved 2021 terryfox circle detailed design capital project. Thank you, Megan. Staff be directed to report back to council with an evaluation of 3 design options and identify a preferred alternative for the for the future of the terryfox circle. And now I will entertain discussion. Okay, no discussion. Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the 3 options, but I would really like to see an amendment added to this that since this came to pass and it was made public, that the motion now before committee be amended to include the following paragraph, and that one of the design options include terryfox circle remaining open to vehicular traffic with accessible parking spaces and a dedicated drop-off point spot in close proximity to the beach area. So I think that's got to be one of the criteria on the 3 issues. Am I correct in assuming that that's still, the way the motion reads, that's going to be included rather than an amendment, or do we need the amendment?
Mr. McMullen, if you'd be so kind.
Staff is following the recommendations from the waterfront design study that was adopted in principle by council. And those recommendations that are noted in the staff report and that I noted in my introduction, which include that vehicles be removed from the terryfox circle and that the parking be relocated. Based on council input, what we have added and what will be included as a design option will be an option that would allow vehicular access to the terryfox circle for special events and scheduled park events. It at this point would not be the intent that the circle simply remain open as a road. So there is a slight difference there.
Yeah, my understanding from the chair is, Councillor Spola, if that's a desired direction that you wish to go in, it would be amendment. It would be a proposed amendment to this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll wait to hear from other councillors before I ask for a seconder on that.
Great, thank you. And now I have Councillor Klooster.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Clark, to staff. I would support Councillor Sapola's amendment. I think that needs to be an option. Closing down the circle completely to vehicular traffic is certainly not an option in my opinion. You know, we like special events. If you're going to have it for the Scottish Festival, Mariposa Folk Festival, other events having the Winter Carnival down there. I think you could probably look at a better option to have more of a kiss and ride down there where you can drop people off and just keep the traffic moving forward. If you want to do a little more enhanced handicapped parking down there as well, I think people still need to get down to the park and still want to go through the Terryfox Circle. Currently, right now, you know, we're asking that the road needs to be redone. In the wintertime, that road is always closed, and we have a lovely kind of makeshift fence with some flags on it and saying, please do not go down here. You know, if we're going to look at doing the road again, then make it open for a year-round access. Those are just my points. I think Councillor Heen may have some other opinions to say that we could certainly keep it open. But right now, I'll second Councillor Sapola's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do know that you mentioned special events, and I believe I heard Mr. McMullen say it could be opened for special events, but maybe not for the other purposes that you're mentioning. I believe I now have the aforementioned Councillor Heen.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So I sat down last night and I thought of all that Cushing Park has meant to me over the years, and just what a special place it is to so many people in our community. Memory after memory came flooding back, far too many to recount, but going back to when I was a teenager, gathered with friends up on the hill, listening to our transistor radios, and that certainly dates me, to being pushed on a swing by different boyfriends on a hot summer evening when we took a break from Teen Town, spending nearly every summer day with my 3 kids at the lake, attending the opening ceremonies for canoe games, which were dedicated to my mom, and then rushing down to Sunnybrook Hospital to be with her as she recovered from very serious surgery. And lastly, driving around the circle hundreds of times in 3 seasons out of 4 is part of my park. One lady told me last week that Terryfox Circle is the prettiest street in Orillia, and she is likely right. I remember back in 1977 when I took up a petition to have part of the park closed off because the change rooms had been torn down, and teenagers were driving through from Jarvis Street at quite a high rate of speed. And I was concerned that a little one would be injured. The council chamber was packed with old people, not wanting to lose the right to drive through the park, and most particularly around the circle. And now I'm one of those old people, and I understand what they were trying to say. Some had mobility issues, and they wanted to drive around the Champlain statue and see the gardens and all that there was to see. I understand that now. They delight in seeing the little children and all the activity, particularly if they live alone. It's their way of feeling connected. Last night, I was also reading my county agenda for tomorrow, and one of the items in it was the percentage of people 55 and over that live in Orillia, 39%. And that's only going to increase in the years to come. So if we're building a park for the future, we need to be thinking about our seniors. I'm quite comfortable in removing all the parking, except for some accessible parking spaces near the washroom, as both Councillor Kluster and Councillor Sapola alluded to, and a drop-off spot with a close proximity to the beach area. So I'm really quite prepared to move to be prepared in the amendment that talks about a design option, including the Terryfox Circle remaining open to vehicular traffic with accessible parking spaces and a dedicated drop-off spot in close proximity to the beach area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heen. I believe I have Councillor Lauer, then Councillor Ainsworth.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. A question and then a comment. First question is, how often is the Terryfox Circle closed currently?
The Terryfox Circle is closed through the winter months. It's not plowed, it's not cleared of snow, so it is closed for the time period that we have snow. Other than that, it would only be closed for special reasons. It was closed this past summer for multiple days a week due to COVID, and so park staff and many people who visited the park had the opportunity to witness what the difference in the park when you remove the traffic from the park and the parking and the in and out movements of those cars. So we did have an interesting experiment this summer where the Terryfox Circle was closed during the busy months, but that was a special circumstance. So typically it would only be in the winter months.
Okay, so we don't routinely close it down on weekends like we were doing this last. Okay, so if I could just comment on Ralph's proposal, I'd be in favor of that for sure. I think everything should be on the table, but I'd also point to some of the ideas that Mark Elger brought forward, which I think are quite interesting. That if it was to remain open, that loop be shortened and changed to the north side. There's definitely a problem with the setup now. We've got way too much going on close to the lake. We've got cars, we've got people on the trail that are basically on the road, and we've got a small playground, and we've got a beach right there. And I totally agree with the notion that there's a safety issue there. However, I do think there are some other alternatives. So I would support the motion, or the amendment for sure, that we make sure we've got a couple opinions and ideas on almost not a status quo, but that it is open or can be open on a regular basis, plus the other design options.
Thank you. I think just for clarification, Mr. McMullen, I believe that there are quite a number, depending on the event, I guess, the circles close during those events, because I think often the vendors are set up right along the loop, are they not?
Correct, for special events that are scheduled through the summer in some cases, that's right.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Ainsworth and Councillor Eamon.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I'd be happy to second Councillor Heen's amendment when the time comes.
I believe the amendment was moved by Councillor Sepola and seconded by Councillor Klooster, but the support is so noted. Councillor Eamon.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and I won't be supporting the amendment. Unlike Councillor Heen, I don't focus my entire life on my past. I'm actually thinking into the future, and my great-grandchildren will be visiting Orillia at some point, and we have created a park there that has amenities. We now have 2 playgrounds that are adjacent to the terryfox circle. We have the beach that is adjacent to the terryfox circle, and my observation, though it's limited because I didn't get around much this summer, but my observation is that young children are running back and forth across that road to and are at extreme risk. And I do believe that the safety issues that have come forward are such that it would be inappropriate for us to not be concerned about those children and about the conflict that is occurring between vehicles and pedestrians in that park. And as my colleagues may remember, if they actually spent a lot of time and energy reading that report, that we provide elsewhere in that park a number of options for our seniors to come to the lake in their vehicles, to park in both restricted spaces and restricted spaces so that there is an adequate parking for those who want to visit our parks in their automobiles. So just because we've done it that way for 50 years doesn't mean that it's the right way to do it for the next 50 years. And that's where I'm putting my mind and my thoughts about what's going to be the best park design for the people of Orillia. And though I'm not as pessimistic as my council colleague that our population is going to age, those of us who are here are going to age. But I will tell you that there are strategies emerging in our community to bring many, many more young folks out of the GTA who are frustrated by the COVID situation and are now finding that places like Orillia are adequate and appropriate for their lifestyle, and that we are providing through our infrastructure, our internet infrastructure and other mechanisms, the ability to work here that will, in fact, I think over time shift the age demographic in Orillia so that there will be an ever-rising number of young people in our community. So no, I'm not in favor of a dedicated option that keeps traffic running around that circle forever. I think that what staff are recommending is totally and completely appropriate for the future of Orillia.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I agree with Councillor Eamon on this. Having spent 6 years on the Active Transportation Committee, I heard many, many times that it just didn't make sense to have a road running through a park. You have kids, you have families, the playground beside the road, kids, as you said, running around, and it's simply not safe. I understand the nostalgia of it. I myself used to drive around there with my my family when I was young and enjoyed that very much, but times have changed. I don't believe it is simply not the safe thing to do, in my view. I do, of course, understand the idea of people with disabilities being able to get down there and to be able to get to the beach area and to the bathrooms. What I was wondering, and Mayor Clark, through you to Mr. McMillan, what I was wondering is the road, it used to actually join onto the terryfox circle, if I remember correctly, that comes off of Jarvis Street, kind of beside the Rotary train station, and then it kind of goes down and stops where the new bathroom is there at the beach. What I was wondering if there might be an opportunity to make that where people could drive in and drop off, kind of almost a cul-de-sac type area at the end of it. It could be a spot to drop people off. It'd be right at the bathrooms, right at the beach. And then perhaps on the aqua theater side of it, have a row of handicap parking spots so that people could park their cars right there.
Mr. McMullen?
Yes. A very interesting design idea. That road you're referring to is part of the trail system, but most significantly, it's used as a park access roadway. So it is gated. Vehicles are allowed in there through that route for maintenance and, for example, the construction of the playground that went onto the beach near the washroom building this past year. That's how the contractors accessed the beach. It's a very interesting design idea. There's no reason that the design problem that will be presented to the consulting team that's retained to deal with this will be the idea of relocating parking. And looking at the terryfox circle in a manner that considers it being either available to pedestrians only or in some cases open to vehicles, and depending on the amendment, perhaps for a further amount of time. But certainly your suggestion is consistent with a design alternative that would provide, as has been spoken to, an opportunity to draw people close to the beach, close to the aqua theater, close to washrooms. So I would consider that a good idea and something that could be passed on the consulting team when they are engaged and we're moving through this design problem.
Thank you, Councilor. You have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Mr. McMillan, and I apologize for kind of dropping that on you. It was my intent to give you a call earlier and kind of throw the idea at you so you had some time to think about it, but I didn't have that opportunity today. I guess the main question that we have is, do we want the terryfox circle to remain open to traffic or not, so that people can cruise through it the way they always have? That's the fundamental issue that we're discussing. So to you, Mr. McMullen, if we add that amendment to have that as one of the options, what does that do in terms of costs, first of all, and also what does that do in terms of what our options might look like? Like if the majority of councillors believe that the terryfox circle should remain open, then terrific. But what I don't want to see is, if the majority don't want it to remain open, then why use up consultants' time coming up with a design that we have no appetite for, if you understand where I'm going there. Thanks.
So this capital project requires the issuance of an RFP in order to retain a qualified consulting team that would consist of landscape architecture and parks design professionals. The three options is a relatively standard way of approaching a design problem like this for a professional designer. However, we will be crafting the RFP, and the number of options and how those are looked at, that will be created during that time. So input as related to how we approach that. If we stuck with only three options and council wants one of those options to be a terryfox circle that is open to traffic all the time, Plus, we've already said we'd like to see an option where it's possible to open the circle for special events. Then we would only have a single option where it would be pedestrian only. But there's no reason that the RFP can't be crafted to include various options for pedestrian only, as well as the other two suggestions that are on the table. If Mr. Sugden has anything to add, that would be great.
Thanks, Mr. McMullen. Mr. Sugden, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Clark. Just to add to what Mr. McMullen has already said, staff and council should be careful not to pre-conclude or prejudge what the outcome of a design exercise would be, as the firms that would bid on this are going to have an area of expertise in coming up with creative solutions to the conflicting demands for uses within the park. I'd be interested to see those outcomes. But the motion and the amendment that's before council, I think, is helps to steer them with respect to one of those potential design solutions. If council can picture, when we go through a municipal class environmental assessment process for a road reconstruction or enlargement project, we come up with, the Act requires us to look at all possible alternatives in that type of a project. In this case, we don't have such a legislative requirement to do that. So we're asking the consultants to come up with 3 alternatives. Staff will review them and make a recommendation to council so that council can review those and make a decision before any capital project to construct the whatever the solution is considered.
Thank you both.
Thanks. I believe I have Councillor Sproul on queue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Hean and Councillor Lehman's comments, and it's not just for old people. It's, and I can speak from experience. My kids bring guests up from Toronto, and the first thing they want to do is go to Frenchie's Stand for a burger and drive around the park and look at Champlain Monument. They don't want to go in the swings. They don't want to go in the swimming or anything else. They just want to drive around, take a look, and look at what it really is. It's heaven on earth. It really is. That whole park there. We've all enjoyed it over history and everything else. All I want to see with the amendment is that we have an idea what it would look like if we went drove around it, keep it open the way it is, and it doesn't have to be as wide. It doesn't have to be whatever. But I think there's a need for people to be able to drive around and look at one of the most beautiful parks we have in Canada. So if we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever other parks that we don't have vehicles driving through, that people just want to go and use it as well. So I think this is very imperative that it, as a tourist draw and as a local residents, want to be able to look at and drive around. But I'm open to suggestions, and I'm open to looking at the 3 proposals or the 3 designs. And one of those designs is the amendment that I'd like to put forward to at least have a good, serious look at it and say, what is it going to look like? And are the people of Orillia want to be able to drive around it?
Okay. I don't see other hands in the air at the moment. We have the main motion, which is already on the floor. We have a proposed amendment, which isn't is it formulated on the floor? Okay, I just have to read it. Thank you. And then if it's okay with council, I would like to speak, and if you wish that I turn over the chair, I gladly will. The amendment is that the motion now before committee be amended to include the following paragraph, and that one of the design options include terryfox circle remaining open to vehicular traffic with accessible parking spaces and a dedicated drop-off spot in close proximity to the beach. Any further discussion on what was essentially the proposed amendment? Councillor, are you okay if I speak from the chair? Okay, thank you. I find this an interesting issue. I think Mr. McMullen said it best when he talked about conflicting demands, or maybe it was Mr. Sugden. conflicting demands for that space. I do believe a lot of the things that go on there are incompatible, and there are safety issues. The other thing I would say is our community really is evolving. As council remember, I don't remember what the plurality of the vote was a few years ago, but we voted to take Front Street essentially from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And that's because of our evolving community. We are becoming more active transporters. We are pedestrians. We're looking to increase the number of pedestrians. And as Councillor Campbell said, it brings his perspective of many years on the Active Transportation Committee. The other thing that strikes me is if we're going to do public consultation, I do believe that we need to, assuming that the consultation is done in the right context, but we need to listen to that public consultation. And Mr. McMullen indicated that 70% of the people that were involved in the consultation for this park design process were in favor of shutting down the circle for vehicular traffic. And I know Councillor Heen is passionate about this, and we had a nice chat earlier. But as much as we have about 25% of our population 65 years of age or older, I believe that is changing. And even before, well, and a few years ago, Councillor Sepul and I were at an AMO an AMO conference, and heard a great presentation on how millennials are making a decision on where to live more based on the quality of life than the actual job. The job is still important, and that has put really at the forefront of a younger person migration. And as Councillor Eamon indicated, COVID certainly has even exemplified that or magnified that, in that these people now realize they can, with the connectivity we have with 5G and with fiber, a lot of those people now realize they can come to Orillia and work, and even in their Toronto job. So I do believe, as much as we have a segment of the population that will continue to age, and we all fall into that, of course, if luck be with us. But I think our percentage of that population will evolve. I do believe it is important to have connectivity to the park, and even in a vehicle to some degree. I mean, I will often go down to the park and sit in the parking lot and do some work, and still be able to see the water, be able to the trail and the boardwalk. So there's lots of opportunities in the park, as somebody else mentioned, for that kind of connectivity. It doesn't have to be at the very foot of the Terry-Fox circle, I believe. So I also like Councillor Campbell's suggestion of maybe creating a drop-off spot or a 10-minute washroom spot, or a few spots over by the washrooms off of Jarvis Street as a possibility. And I think Mr. Councillor McMullen, Mr. McMullen will maybe take that back as some information. So I'm not opposed to always seeing all sides of the issue, and as much as I am very, very unlikely to support keeping the circle open for vehicular traffic, if the amendment goes through, then we'll come back and judge one concept against the other. But at the moment, I'm in favor of the 3 concepts that would show us what that would look like for active transportation and not vehicular traffic. Thank you, members of council. Okay, so the amendment is on the floor, and I will read it. It's moved by Councillor Sepul, seconded by Councillor Cluser, that the motion now before committee be amended to include the following paragraph, and that one of the design options include Terry-Fox Circle remaining open to vehicular traffic and accessible parking spaces with dedicated drop-off spot in close proximity to the beach area. And for the last bit of conversation, Councillor Lauer.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I just want to clarify. If we're approving this amendment, I'm assuming that our consultants or designers are going to look at all options. I'm not a fan of the Jarvis Street solution. That just puts cars right on the beach pretty well. So that I don't think is going to work. But will they be looking at other things? As I had mentioned before, the report contains a few ideas that were thrown out the last time we did have this report in front of us. I just would like that comfort that they're going to look at all these other ideas, and we're not giving them direction to look at the Jarvis Street solution only.
Mr. McMullen, I think you're probably best qualified to answer that.
Yes, that would certainly be the intention, is that we retain a professional and qualified team, that the design problem, including all of it, the background, all of the reports that exist with the city would be provided to them, and that they would use their professional discretion as well as a thorough understanding of the problem to come back and present to us solutions that they believe to be the best for the park.
All right. Thank you, one and all. I will now call the question on the proposed amendment to the main motion. All in favor? That is carried. Back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? All right, as amended, I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much for a very good discussion. I think we're getting into, my father and I used to say, the nits grits. Well, except my iPad's not. Apologize for this. And I saw this problem coming. Sorry, let's be one moment. All right, somebody's changed their name. Okay, so I'm going to wait for my iPad to fire back up, but I know this is with respect to the wonderful event that took place, seems like about 300 years ago now, but it was just earlier last year, the Ontario Winter Games, and some of our key players are here right now to introduce what was a very comprehensive report, Marcia Russell and Christine Waring. And whoever's taking the lead, please do.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The purpose of this report is to seek council support in allocating $72,000 legacy fund from the hosting of the Orillia 2020 Ontario Winter Games for the purchase of a Whibbit inflatable obstacle course and the implementation of the annual Whibbit Games. The 2020 Ontario Winter Games were an enormous success. The event featured 3,500 participants and over 10,000 visitors to the area. This created an economic impact of $6.1 million for Ontario and $4.4 million in Orillia. These games would not have been possible without our dedicated and passionate games organizing committee led by Jed Levine. Not to mention the hundreds of community volunteers and our generous sponsors, including Hydro One, City of Barrie, CAA Travel Insurance, Georgian College, Rockwater Wealth Management, Plaza Auto Group, and many more. This legacy is a representation of the successes of this group of volunteers and the Games sponsors. The Legacy Committee identified youth 7 to 15 as a target age group based on the age of the Games athletes to benefit from this legacy project. Based on this criteria, GOC were presented with 3 legacy options to review. A majority decision was established endorsing the purchase of the Whibbit and the hosting of an annual Whibbit Games. The Whibbit is a highly visible rubber inflatable obstacle course fun for the whole family. It can be used as a whole or it can be used in sections, giving great flexibility. Lastly, the report also contains the final Games report, which will be given to the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries as part of the transfer payment agreement. Within this report, there is several useful informational pieces, including the economic impact analysis, which was conducted by the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance, committee successes, challenges, and recommendations for future games, an overview of media and social media, as well as the financial breakdown of the games cost. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Christine. Listen, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it seems like such a long time ago now because of the intervention of COVID. And I want to say I commend you and the rest of the Ontario Winter Games organizers for scheduling the event just before COVID broke. So we were able to just sneak it in. So, I mean, that's brilliant scheduling. I don't know how you did it, but maybe you could have let the CAO and the mayor know that this pandemic was coming when it did. I would just say, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to you, Christine, and everybody else, and Jed Levine for taking the volunteer lead. And Jed, of course, describes the organizing committee as the dream team. And certainly all the volunteers that you alluded to. It was amazing in our partnering municipalities. I mean, it really was a success by all accounts. And you fought some really rough weather on Friday, which created some logistical issues. But everywhere I went, and I think I believe I made 18 of the 20 venues, and despite the weather. Everywhere I went, I saw people from Orillia. I saw them from elsewhere as well. Don't get me wrong, but all these wonderful ambassadors going out and representing Orillia, and with a great smile on their face. It was really quite heartwarming. And you said 3,500 athletes, 10,000 visitors to the area, and we know at that time of year it's a nice economic shot in the arm for everybody. Anyway, so I'll sign off by saying thank you. And thanks for very positively putting Orillia even further on the map. I believe I saw Councillor Klooster. Go ahead, Councillor Klooster, and then I'll put the proposed resolution on the floor if unless there's a desire to go in a different direction.
Thank you to you, Mayor Clark. And yes, my sentiments exactly. The games were certainly a great success for Orillia, and all the hard work that went into it in the cold weather that of the opening night. I'm glad we had our toques from some of our sponsors. Just a question on the Weebit inflatable. I did some research this afternoon, and it looks like a lot of those inflatables are put in pools. Is that correct, or will it be on land? Maybe staff could answer that question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what it is we're actually projecting this to go into the pool in the rec center.
Yeah. So my question is, so that's great. Will the $72,000 will that come with like promotional materials? Will it come with? I see in some of the videos that a lot of the participants are wearing like a water shirt that we could certainly sell. It's a great marketing tool. I mean, moving forward, the programming for this, we could certainly drive a lot of people through our rec center. It would kill at least an hour or so with young kids, and our age demographic that we're going after is certainly the age group that likes to stay in the water for hours at a time. So thanks so much.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, when you're purchasing the Wibbit, they do some different promotions. So it would be depending on what promotions they're doing at the time, would be if we were able to get shirts or masks or whatever it might be.
$5,000 budget for hosting an event, so maybe which might include some of that stuff. I'm not sure. I've got Councillor Campbell and Councillor Eamon.
Sorry, Mayor Clark, just one other question if I could.
Go right ahead, Rob.
Yeah. The other question is, will we have to look at other kind of external storage for this equipment, or do we have enough space in the rec center for storage? That was my only question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the storage available in the rec center.
If I could just add through you, Mr. Mayor, just going back to Councillor Klooster's branding and promotional question. This cost does include branding the entire Wibbit. So the Wibbit would have the city's logo on it, and it would also have reference to legacy of the Orillia 2020 Ontario Winter Games on it as well. So it will be branded as part of the cost.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Of the three options in the report, this is certainly the one I found the most intriguing. It looks like a really fun unit, actually. My question through you, Mayor Clark, is how long does it take to inflate and deflate the thing, right? To set it up and tear it down? It just looks like it would be quite an operation.
So I could just expand on that. The two questions I have was one around storage and having a pretty decent knowledge of the rec center. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, around the ease of operation and setting up and tearing down, if I could just add that to Councillor Campbell's question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So let's start with the first part. So basically, to set up the entire thing would probably take about 2 hours to inflate it and install it into the pool. And then if it can be used in modular pieces. So if we were to have like an open swim or something, we could put 1 or 2 pieces in, which would only take about 20 minutes to half an hour to put in. And with that, we were looking at doing like a Wibbit Sunday. So we're looking at dedicating a whole day when we're putting in the entire inflatable, because it takes that time to set up and take down. That way we could schedule different time blocks and for different activities to happen throughout the day. Does that answer all your
If it's
questions?
2 hours to set up, about how long to tear down, or do you know that?
It's about an hour and a half to tear down, and then staff have to dry it and stuff and put it away.
So that would be some lost pool time, obviously, that we wouldn't be able to schedule anything in the pools. But yeah, I think it's a really neat idea, and just the name of it makes me smile. So
It's a frog named it, I think. Wibbit. No, all right. Councillor Eamon and then Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Councillor Campbell asked my question. My concern was simply that we've designed this facility to provide service to our community. This was not contemplated. It strikes me as being something that will consume time and energy that we weren't thinking of. It sounds like an interesting concept, and I'm somewhat excited by the fact that we could have contests and meets and things of that nature. But again, it strikes me that if we do that, it's dedicating our time to that, not to the original use of the facility. So I'm cautious about it, but I'm also certainly support the recommendation.
Thank you, Marcia.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in response to Councillor Eamon's comment, we would treat it similar to how we would treat hockey tournaments when they come into town, and it would be pretty similar that way. The adjusting of what we have happening on those days, that would be something that would be taken into consideration and would be scheduled well ahead of time so that user groups and general public are aware of the change.
That's a good question and also a good response. Certainly the abilities for some of our visiting teams to take advantage of it, I think would be terrific. I believe I have closing out the discussion, Councillor Spola and Councillor Follis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for the final report. It's really, really well done and a lot of great information for us as a counselor that I can use, especially the economic benefits to it. So I'm just wondering, is this report available for public, or can the presentation that you have here be made to council so that the public can see it? Just curious.
Well, it's certainly a public agenda. I don't know if anybody wants to recommend the best way for public to access this. So you can certainly go online and access the report. It is quite a.
I thought, Mr. Mayor, if it could be made to council, then people that are on Rogers or whatever can see the report and just pick out the more relevant slides that apply to the economic and also the number of people and so on.
All right. Well, Marcia, do you want to address that?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can absolutely post that online for people to view.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Jay, then Pat.
Thanks. Through the chair, I just wanted to say we're very fortunate to be in a position that we're kind of we have this money to spend, and we're kind of narrow in how we can spend it. So this is kind of a nice thing that we can bring in, and really exciting image to look at and everything like that. I wondered if it might be, I was curious if this is something that had been considered, because I know in the image it's portrayed as being in the rec center, and I was curious, obviously that would be its primary location. Would we ever be in a situation where we might use it at one, like Cooch Beach Park or over at Tudhope? Are those ever situations too where you can use it outside? I'm sure there'd be some implications there, but just if you guys could speak to that, that'd be appreciated. Thanks.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, we do have a vendor that offers, it's actually a Whibbit as well, Splash On, that is currently located in Tudhope Park, so that it would not be a route we would go. In addition, it does require anchors that would have to be put underwater in order to keep it in place so that it doesn't float away overnight. So that's part of the installation that would go into the recreation center, making it much harder for us to move it outdoors.
Thank you for that. Mason, Pat, and then Mason can bring us home.
Thank you. First of all, I was echoing Councillor Sepulveda's comments on a report. Extremely well done, and possibly this could be very useful for the whoever does the 2022 games as a very good resource for them of what to do and what not to do, because I think that's could really learn from reading this report. And Marcy, when you say that there's a Whibbit at Tudhope Park, if this was being used during the summer, would it not be in competition with the vendor at Tudhope Park?
That would be correct. It would be in competition. We do overall pool usage. You do see a decline, especially in communities that are located on two lakes. So we would suspect seeing a decline regardless within the pool. So typically municipalities would use those times to clean the pool or what have you. So we wouldn't see as much of a need for it in the summer, but fall, winter, spring, definitely a need. Christine, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Mason, Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, as somebody who's actually went out to Tudhope Park there and have been through the obstacle course with our 14-year-old, I can tell you that it is a blast. Definitely fell quite a few times, but I think this is a phenomenal thing to have within the rec center, especially during the cooler months and such. I know if you went out right now to Tudhope Park, you probably would have a completely different type of obstacle course with try not to fall through the ice and things. So I think this is pretty logical, especially during the times where we want to encourage more people to be active, especially when this whole COVID situation is over down the road. I'm sure that folks are going to be looking at a lot more reasons to get out and enjoy the amenities that the city has to offer. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mason. Okay, Ralph, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 72,000, and I looked online, and to purchase one for a swimming pool, it's $12,300, somewhere around there. Are we planning to expand it? U.S., of course, U.S. money, because they're made in Germany, if I understand correctly. So I'm just wondering, are we going to expand the materials to put in the pool, or is that price include other things?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the one that you're seeing is about 4 pieces. So ours is a bigger set, and it's been custom designed for the rec center. And it also includes, like Marcia said, the branding.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Councillor Ms. Waring and Councillor Sepola. Councillor Campbell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and sorry for coming back to this. I had made a note and I missed it earlier. My other question that I had was about liability. Do we need special insurance coverage for this, or would this be covered as part of an existing policy? Just wondered where we were at there.
This would be covered as part of the city's current insurance policy. There's no additional insurance costs for this.
Terrific, thank you.
Just before I call the question, one last, did I put it on the floor yet? Not yet. All right. No, before I call the question, I got two things to do. One is if we get Mason out there and Rob out there and me out there, it'll hold us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we anticipate maybe doing a competition between the City of Barrie councillors and the City of Orillia councillors. So we would anticipate that it could hold both councils in order to compete.
We need to start training.
You first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the capacity is actually 100 people.
I was also intrigued by the obstacle course that was outside, but this one I think has a softer landing, so that's where my support would be. Okay, so we'll put the proposed resolution on the screen. This committee recommends the council that is recommended in the report CSLD 2102, dated January 5th, 2021, from the Corporate Services / Legal Department, 72,000 be authorized from the Orillia 2020 Ontario Winter Games Legacy Fund following the receipt of the final grant installment to purchase the Whibbit inflatable obstacle course and establish the Orillia Whibbit Games. Just before I ask for a mover or seconder, I want to say this is only possible because of the way the Ontario Winter Games were run, and because if you didn't stay within budget, the Legacy Fund is not a reality. So again, to the Jed and Christine and Marcia and the rest of the team and the organizing committee and the sponsors, thanks for running the games in an efficient manner and for allowing this to happen. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Sepola, Councillor Heen, thank you. Unless there's any further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're getting close to the home stretch. We're in the home stretch, I guess. I understand we have an inquiry from Councillor Follis, and with respect to the coat of arms. And Jay, if you wish, I'll let you speak to that right now, and then you can talk about the proposed resolution.
Thanks, Steve. So yeah, I just had stuff written out here. So I just wanted to speak to the inquiry that I put forward. someone in the Indigenous community had reached out to me and brought to my attention a problem with the visual imagery of our coat of arms, which has an Indigenous paddler in the center, and it's color and they're colored red. And actually, Steve, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you just happened to move the camera in such a way that it shows the coat there. As a counselor, I hadn't really noticed it. We rarely kind of interact with our coat of arms. It's at the top of the agenda. It's the one that's located behind Steve there. And I believe we get pins as well that have them, but in most circumstances we use the Orillia logo, and so it's very kind of it's one of those things that you don't tend to notice. And so anyway, after I received this kind of comment, I did a bit more research and had some help from staff. And through consultation with RAM and some Indigenous people in the area, there was kind of a suggestion that the placement of the paddler and the image itself was actually one that was kind of seen to be of honor. It's at the center of the coat and seen to be a place of it's not meant to be insulting, but a place of kind of respect. But where there was some concern was around the color with the Indigenous paddler being red. And so what kind of after some of this research, basically what we came up with was this particular inquiry, whereas if this inquiry is approved, it will give our culture department the ability to work with the original designer of the coat of arms and the Canadian Heraldic Authority to report back on some suggested changes and their implications. And basically the focus of these changes would be around creating a more accurate and respectful image. So kind of as we had mentioned, or as I had mentioned there, the image itself is not necessarily disrespectful or the placement of it, just more the color. So likely the recommendations would be around changing the color of the particular paddle. And I do want to emphasize, so that would be likely a very small change. I did want to let everyone know as well, and many may already be familiar with this, is our coat of arms has changed in the past as a city. I believe the last change was in 1999, so it's not unheard of that we change our coat of arms to upgrade it or to make it look more up to date, or make changes to make it sensitive to the time. So this is something that there's a past history here, and I think it's something worth exploring and seeing what opportunities we have to kind of improving that image. It's not necessarily one that's that we see on a regular basis. It's not, I would argue it's not as prominent as our logo or anything like that, but still something that would warrant a change. So anyway, I welcome any questions that any council members might have. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. On that, Councillor Eamon.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and I do find it interesting, and I will support my colleague's inquiry motion. But 30 some years ago, the mayor of the day raised exactly the same question, and the coat of arms was redesigned at that time to be, in the eyes of those who were advising, more accurate and more respectful of our Indigenous friends and colleagues. So I think it's an issue that is worth our thinking about in terms of how we interpret history. That here in short 30 years, we have a view that what was then an appropriate image is no longer seen as an appropriate image. And as we contemplate the Champlain Monument, as we contemplate a lot of the symbols that exist in our country, that represent our history, not just our Indigenous history, but the history of Canada. We should be very cautious that appropriateness and properness may not necessarily be the most appropriate way of representing what has happened in the past. And we don't want to necessarily lose a perspective on our history in order to be totally right and appropriate. So in this particular case, I'm not uncomfortable at all about an adjustment to our coat of arms.
Councillor Iman, do you know who that mayor was 30 years ago?
I do recall the mayor at the time. I'm not quite sure what his name was, but he was certainly one of the best mayors that this city has ever experienced.
Well, I understand he had dark hair back then.
Second opinion.
Okay, thank you for that. And Pat, are you okay if we put the proposed resolution on the screen? Then I'll come right back to you. Thank you, Christine. This committee recommends the council that staff be directed to prepare a report with respect to the following: the feasibility and cost of updating the City of Orillia coat of arms to provide an accurate and respectful representation of the Indigenous paddler. A mover and a seconder. Jay, I'm going to assume that you're the mover, and Mason the seconder. All right. And Pat, discussion.
I just reached out to pick out this old coat of arms. Wait a minute. And as you may see, the native person is a different color. I think he appears more yellow. More yellow than red. But this, I'm not sure what date this coat of arms is, but it's quite an old one. So it does show that the coat of arms has changed over the years, and so is the color of our Indigenous person. So it's not without precedent to look at it.
Of course, your water in that one's green. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the proposed resolution that I've read? I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now my device works. Thank you for that. Any announcements? Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I just wanted to officially wish everybody a happy new year. I know this is our first meeting of the year all back together, and I'm just happy to be back with everybody. And hopefully this year is a lot better than last one, because it's been an interesting time. And I think the big thing is that we all just continue to work together and work with the community to make sure we move forward in a positive manner. Thank you.
I know, Councillor Ainsworth, based on what happened in the U.S. last week, I got a message from JR, who was on the EMC with me, and it said, I've experienced a 7-day trial of 2021 and no thanks. I thought that was cute. Anyway, thank you very much for that, Councillor Ainsworth. Any further announcements? The only thing I would add, maybe on behalf of the EMC, hopefully not speaking at a school, we're not out of this yet, as everybody well knows. The vaccine, although actually in Orillia, well, sorry, it's in Barrie right now, but there's some people from Orillia that are in queue to get it, such as our hospital staff have begun to do so. So there is some very good news on the horizon. But as everybody has seen in the media the last number of days, we've been over 3,000 cases for the last week and a bit, and that apparently is projected to be even worse over the next few weeks. So the next few weeks are absolutely critical in our behavior, and how we behave is going to either help flatten that a little bit or make it worse. I will say that the people of Orillia should be very proud. And we've had 3 fatalities, which is extremely unfortunate. And we're getting close to 100 cases, but our case rate for urban center is indicates to us that the people in Orillia generally have taken this very seriously and have behaved responsibly. We're going to hear some appears some other measures from the province tomorrow in terms of restrictions. And I would just ask people for their continued patience, as tough as it is, and as we begin to crawl out of this over the next few months. Thank you for that. And Madam Deputy Clerk, are we aware of anybody in queue to speak at the open public forum? Okay, thank you. In that case, I will ask for somebody to make a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Ainsworth. Thank you, Councillor Cipolla. All in favor? Take care.
Thanks, Steve.